I remember it was school holidays, an onslaught of miserable winter's days, with a bombardment of pelting rain, howling winds, and a cold that would make Jack Frost himself envious. Being a kid, there's nothing worse than being confined to your house for a 2-week school break. Both of my parents worked and we lived far out of town in the bush. Anytime I got to see friends outside of school was an event to be celebrated. Luckily, I had Obi to keep me company. He was our new German Shepherd puppy. The weather was so bad I couldn't wear him out outside. Not that I could anyway. Obi was showing early signs of hip dysplasia and was eventually going to need surgery. So I got creative with indoor toys. Treat puzzles I made from Lego, rope, and various boxes for him to chew on and demolish while teething. During the first week of school holidays, my parents were late coming home, but I hadn't heard anything from them. The storm outside was so unreal that I thought the second story of our house would rip right off from the wind. And poor little Obi was frightened to death by the lightning. Every clap of thunder would shoot through him like a bolt of electricity. I spent the whole day comforting him and keeping him distracted, with little success. I figured the storm was preventing my parents from getting home on time. It was so dark outside, I eventually lost track of the time, slowly drifting to sleep next to Obi on the couch. I was woken by the sound of the doorbell. At this point, most of the storm was over, as our doorbell was so soft that I don't think I would have been able to hear it earlier through the rain and wind. Mom and Dad had issues with the garage remote door working, so assumed I was them. It didn't even cross my mind why they would ring the bell when they had a key. So I didn't know what to do when I saw a stranger in the doorway as I swung the door open. "Dreadful night, isn't it?" the man in the doorway said. I didn't say anything. Honestly, didn't know what to say. He was wearing what looked like a very expensive suit that was dripping wet from the rain. The cuffs of his pants were covered in so much mud that it looked like he had hiked through the whole bush to get here. Most of his face was hidden by the shadow of his hat and his garish yellow eyes piercing through. His skin looked sickly, like a frog who'd been baking in the hot sun and had attempted to rehydrate its already crispy skin. And so skinny, like he was currently rotting away in front of me. "Are your parents home?" the rotting man asked. We were taught how to answer these kinds of questions through our school stranger danger talks. "Dad's in the shower," I said in a knee-jerk reaction. The man's attention was now on something behind me, but I didn't want to take my gaze off of him. He could easily call my bluff and push his way in. I was less than half his size. Without taking his attention off whatever was behind me, he said, "Well, I don't want to bother him, but I'll come back when he's home." Without me even touching the door, he closes it and walks back to his car. I immediately locked the door. When I turned around, I saw what his attention was so fixed on. Obi, asleep behind me. I hear his car start and run to my upstairs window to watch him leave from my bedroom window. His car just sat there, headlights on, motor running. It was after 30 minutes that I saw him walk to his car from behind our garage. I had been watching his car all this whole. For half an hour, he was walking around my house and I didn't even know. My phone started to ring. The glow illuminated my face and the rotting man immediately looked in my direction. I ducked. It was Dad calling. He said he was 5 minutes away. A tree had fallen onto the main road and had to wait until it was cleared to come home. With the storm, he couldn't get a signal to ring me. Mom was bringing pizza too. My excitement distracted me enough for me not to notice the man leaving. As when I looked up, the rotting man and his car were gone. When my parents arrived home and I told them about the rotting man over dinner, Mom told me I had done the right thing, but next time look out the living room window before opening it to anyone I don't recognize. I said that he was planning to come back. "Did he say when?" Dad asked. "No, just said when you'd be home." My parents passed each other an equal look of concern. The following week the weather had improved. The sun was trying its hardest to break through the haze of clouds that seemed to be hovering solely over our property. This day, the rotting man returned. I saw his car at the bottom of our long driveway. Luckily, this time Dad answered the door. But he answered before I could tell him it was the rotting man. I hid near the door. Hidden enough that the rotting man couldn't see me, but I wanted to hear what they talked about. I could only pick up the odd word. I heard something about digging and money. The conversation was over as quickly as it started as I heard my dad thank the rotting man and walked back into the living room. I could see the gears turning in his head, deep in thought. That was the man who came to our house when I was alone, I said. He mentioned that, he replied. What did he want? Apparently he used to live here. He buried something very sentimental in our backyard and asked if we'd allow him to dig it up. I said I didn't feel comfortable with a stranger digging in my backyard, but he assured me I could supervise the dig and offered us some money to do so. How much? More than a man dressed like that should have. He was wearing a suit, wasn't he? Yeah, but that suit was a little worse for wear. Looked like he'd been wearing that suit every day for the past 10 years. Smelled too. Anyway, he gave his number if I changed my mind. As Dad walked away, I saw the man at his car staring at Obi again in the backyard. He slowly walked towards him but stopped himself when he saw me. He locked eyes with me, motionless, waiting to see who would break first. Do you want mayo or sweet chili on your chicken wrap? Called Mum from the kitchen. Sweet chili, please. A little or a lot? Lots, please. He was gone. I only looked away for a moment, but the rotting man had vanished again. Dad sat on his armchair with Obi on his lap. He looked as if he was drowning in thought. He finally folded and called the rotting man that night, or at least attempted to. I eventually heard him leave the man a voice message over dinner. That Friday a storm hit us hard, but that was the day Dad had organized the dig. I was upstairs performing my 6 p.m. weekday ritual of watching The Simpsons on Channel 10 when I heard the knock. I looked down to see the rotting man in the same black suit but with 2 other men accompanying him. They were holding shovels and umbrellas over themselves. The rotting man didn't seem to care about the rain. All 4 men, including my dad, made their way to the hill behind our house. I could just see them from the kitchen. They were just barely lit from the outdoor motion light that hung from the shed. Dad finally walked up and they began to dig. The 2 men that came with the rotting man did all the digging. They dug for what felt like hours. They got so deep that the motion detector light would occasionally go off until Dad waved his arms for it to turn back on. One of the men passed something to the rotting man. Dad walked over to see what it was. I couldn't quite make it out. The motion light went off. It was off longer this time. When the light turned back on, Dad was gone and the men were out of the hole filling it back in. The rotting man was squatting, counting a collection of what looked like bones on the ground with his talon-like finger. I panicked. There was a body in our backyard. And surely they hadn't just buried my dad in its place. Not with us still here? Oh God, we were witnesses. There couldn't be any witnesses, meaning whatever he dug up, no one could know about. The light went off again. When it came back on, the 3 men were gone. I ran to Mum, who was in the living area watching her show. Before I could say anything, there was a knock at the door. I pleaded with Mum, saying that something wasn't right. I was watching them and Dad vanished. He's probably fixing the shed light, I warned him. This whole place is falling apart, she said. She opened the door and the 3 men were there. I'm sorry to bother you, Ms., but Daniel needs your help. The dog got out, said the rotting man. Oh crap, you stay here and I'll be right back, Mum said to me. I tried to clutch onto her arm in a last attempt to keep her inside. I'll be fine, kiddo. Lock the doors and we'll be back in 15. She reassured me. The door shut and I immediately locked the door. I ran all around the house and locked all the doors and windows and closed all the blinds. I grabbed the home phone ready to call the police at 15 minutes exactly. The silence was maddening. My brain was bombarding me with thoughts of what was going to happen and even more horrid thoughts of what happened to Obi. I peeked through the living room blinds. I could see a couple of flashlights walking through the trees ahead. They were moving further and further away. Before long, they were fully engulfed by the bush. 15 minutes passed. I pressed the first 0 on the phone. Mum, I muttered in front of the door, somehow thinking my room tone voice was going to pierce the slab like wooden door. I pressed the second 0. Dad, I called, praying they were on the other side. Just as I was about to press the third 0, the doorknob began violently turning as someone was trying to come in. Let me it's bloody freezing out here, Dad cried. Opening the door, both parents came in dripping from the rain. Sorry kiddo, Obi got out. He couldn't have gotten far, he said. Mum put her hand on my shoulder and then brought me into a hug. Obi's a smart little puppy. He'll have found some shelter out of the rain. Then when the rain stops, we'll go looking again, she said. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I waited for the rain to stop all night, looking out the window hoping I'd see Obi in the driveway. Each time forcing myself to look, feeling that the next time I did I'd see the rotting man staring back at me in the darkness. The next morning, the rain finally cleared with the sun, parting the sky like some holy miracle. I felt like it was my first time seeing blue sky. I already had my boots on ready to find Obi. Just as my folks were ready to lock up, there was a knock at the door. It was the rotting man again. I almost didn't recognize him. It wasn't him being in broad daylight, it was his suit. It was clean and dry and he looked healthy. In his arms was Obi, alive and well. He gently gave me my boy. I was overwhelmed with joy. I didn't want to let go of my best friend ever again. Mum walked up from behind me. Oh, hello again, she greeted the rotting man. I found him on the road as we were driving home. Forgive me if I didn't want to drive back during the rain. I thought I'd wait until it cleared. I may have given him too many treats while we waited, he said. I thanked him, as audibly as I could with my head buried in my dog's fur. May I say goodbye to Obi? The rotting man asked. I held Obi towards him and the man gave him a gentle pat on the head, his palm the size of Obi's head. A warm smile drifted across his mouth. He thanked us one last time and left. Only I never saw his car this time. I thought he must lived close because waiting just at the edge of our property was a very fluffy border collie patiently waiting for him. It sprung to life with so much joyous energy. I thought they'd knock the man over. They both walked together from our driveway and finally into the bush. 2 weeks ago today, Obi passed away at the ripe old age of 13. He lived a great life, and even with his arthritis in his later years, we still lived life to the fullest. But I finally thought of the story and asked Dad what the rotting man dug up. Bones, not human of course, although there was a moment I was ready to call the police. It was the bones of his childhood dog. He said he couldn't bear to be away from her for so long. He was a bit of a Fruit Loop, but his money helped us out a lot, actually paid for Obi's surgery. I had Obi cremated. I thought how even though he's no longer here, I know he's still with me.